So we just finished recording here with Alex. It was a good conversation. We topped growth, leadership, failures, wins, all the things that happens in the sales life. And yeah, the tequila trick was also mentioned. So have a listen on all your channels. Alexander, welcome.
Thank you, Anders.
Yeah, from BDR to mid-market or SMB AE to enterprise director, VP of sales. You've gone through the ranks, and now you are VP of sales of one of the hottest things coming out of Denmark since Faxe Kondi.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, just raised last year, or this year, $3.5 million in the Series A.
31 point.
31.5. Yeah, I
million
missed a comma there.
Yeah, you did. So, yeah, that was significant. I think it was the second largest tech Series A in Denmark. So, exhausting, but exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What was the first thing, like, how did you end up there? Like, how?
I think, from my perspective, I've always put myself into hard situations. I've always had a fear of becoming complacent, like stationary, not developing myself. So I think it started all the way back in my first kind of enterprise role as a BDR, where I was in Oracle. I came to Dublin, and back in the beginning of 2014, Oracle was and is still today primarily a database business, but they were also the second largest application business. They were doing software as a service as a new kind of initiative in Europe anyways, back then. And I remember we were like 40 new starters, and they asked us, do you want to work on our database business or on our new SaaS application area? I was like 38 people moved to databases because that was the bread and butter. That was the exciting stuff in Oracle back then. And me and one other person moved to the SaaS applications. So I think there's really this kind of, I did it because I thought it sounded cool. To be fully transparent, it was not like I had foreseen this was going to be the next big thing. But I was like, okay, logging into applications online, pretty comfortable, pretty convenient. So I moved into that, and I think the number one reason that I am where I am today is that I have a very high risk profile. I like to put myself in job positions that I'm not sure I can manage, but I'm eager to learn how to do them and develop fast.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of overarching theme of my career.
When you first stepped in to GetWhy, what was the one thing that you're like, holy shit, this needs fixing in the sales organization now?
Really what we hadn't identified our ICP, we had no product market fit, we had a legacy sales team selling another service than a technology. And I think I had this idea due to my background being in very well-oiled sales organizations that I had the clear path. I knew how the end result was going to look. So if I just guided us towards that, we were going to be fine. But what I really found out was that I had really underestimated that every choice you take, there's also 10 choices you can't take. So it's really it's not about whether you do the right things, which I thought was the recipe. It's around how do I prioritize the things that I want to do in the correct way, because I'm saying no to something else.
If you would go back now, like it's been in GetWhy 2.5 years, right? If you go back, what advice would you have told yourself? What would you have done differently?
I would most definitely not have punched myself as much in the beginning for the errors I made. I think building, especially as early stage of a company as I was in, you fail a lot. Like it is constant failure. It's how quickly you iterate, how fast you learn from those failures, to be honest. I think that the good thing was that in the company we had a very good culture around failing. So it's more me being hard on myself and not as much my peers or my seniors being hard on me. So I think that was something that I took in from the culture. It's like, it's fine you fail. It's like, it's a especially when you know the early days is you don't know who you sell to, you don't know you know what you sell to some extent, you don't know what the value proposition is going to be, you don't even know how that product is packaged, right? So yeah,
learn from your mistakes. I sent 450 packages, beautiful Royal Copenhagen packages with customized messages to a bunch of marketeers, CMOs, VP of marketing here in the Nordics, a week before COVID shut down. Like it was very low. We had one login to that lead capturing form, and it was like a BDR from their company. It was not great. It's a little bit hard to learn from, avoid pandemics, but like at least that's what I'm taking away from that one.
Definitely. But one thing on that, a little funny anecdote from my time in my first large enterprise is that we had a group of people. It was not me though. So I would say, anyways, but a group of people that decided to do a similar initiative where they were sending letters, and there was something about those letters where they were putting flour into the letters. So when you took it out, the flour would come out. Something they had an analogy on why that fit the technology business. So you can imagine in 2014 sending letters full of flour to companies was like immediately CIA was on it and stuff like that. So it was a big thing. I think they quieted it down, but it was a huge PR disaster.
There's no bad PR. Has there been any cringy moments that you're like, stepping into management and where you're like, looking back, that's not a great move by Alex, the manager?
Yes, I think I did make the mistake a couple of times on hiring based on what I saw on the paper and not what I kind of felt through the process. And I think those hurt because ultimately, especially when joining a startup, I think there's some factors that are more important than if you hire for anything else. Like normally what I would look at is like, coachability, what is the drive, business acumen as the kind of sacred triangle of hiring, so to say, especially in younger roles. But I really think when you do a early stage startup, it's about resilience. Like that's the number one determining factor for success is how resilient are you? Because you're going to be having, the typical salespeople should be accustomed to rejection. But when you're in the early days, it's not like, 80% of my life is rejection. It's like 100% of your life is rejection, right?
Yeah.
So resilience back then was and should be the overarching. And then when you get product market fit, that changes.
So how, like in this stage, how do you hire for your sales team? Like how do you find these killers?
I think it's not to be honest, I don't think that's a sales leadership job necessarily alone. I think when you're even in the early scale-up days, probably the number one key pillar of your companies is making the right hires. And I truly believe that, and we do that as well, when we have a person, even for BDR job, the weight of the success of that person is so important cross-functionally that we actually bring in multiple leaders. And there has to be a coherent agreement that this individual on multiple levels is the right for the company. And what I've gotten to learn is that I'd rather miss a good hire occasionally than hiring a bad one occasionally. And I think that's so key. It's like, if there isn't a fully agreement across everybody who has interacted with that person, that person can support us in driving forward and reaching the next milestone, I don't think it's right.
Okay, so you pull the plug earlier rather than having like milestones in the first couple of months after, because I mean it's you kind of want to have a trial period as well, but you rather just not give an offer than if not everybody is consensus. What's your favorite question to get to finding some good talent and scraping there. Because I always found that sometimes the best interviewers, like they were maybe not the best hires, and the people that interviewed a little bit like shakingly, it was just because they weren't accustomed to that situation, right? So if you do a lot of work, if you do a lot of jobs, you do a lot of interviews, and you get good at it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at your job.
Definitely, and I can actually start with what questions I dislike the most, because I think there's a misconception, and I think it was Google that started all that you have to have this case mindset where you had these small brain farts that you had to be able to respond quickly to, and that I hate. That I would never do. To the extent where if somebody did that to me in a job interview, I would say goodbye. I'm like,
how many bananas have been sold?
Yeah. So if you're asking me, if you're judging my possibility of filling this role by something you have read on the back page of a cartoon, or could as easily has read on the back page of a cartoon, that's not serious. So I think, and this is actually something that one of my colleagues in the leadership team taught me. I think the best question that I ask people that comes in is probably the first, which is a question that everybody can answer. That is not, I don't judge them by it. It's not to see what they answer. It's like, what's the last thing you've watched on Netflix?
Okay.
Or similar streaming service. And that question is to get a natural flow in the conversation. Because if I am in a relatively small organization, define how well you are going to perform from a cultural perspective, from a learning perspective, from a development perspective, the first thing I want to do is to have a real human one-to-one conversation with you. So I start with an easy question, and I also say up front, this is not to test you, but what's the last thing? And what I'm...
But it is a test, though, because there is definitely wrong answers.
There is. But the wrong answer, I would actually say, is somebody who's like trying to, sound unnecessarily smart in that question, which is like, oh, I'm watching this, thing about how the macroeconomical tendencies is changing. Like, if they start going into a route where I'm like, because the next question to that is, why did you watch it? How was it? Like, just to get, once again, the conversation flowing. And if they then start fumbling because they were lying in the first question, then I'm like...
So what did you watch last on Netflix? Do you even have time to watch Netflix these days?
Yeah, I do. And I think relaxing is now we're going into something that my future Alex 5 years from now might not like me saying.
Which was exactly one of the preemptives, like make sure that we don't say anything that future Anders and Alex will hate. Okay, but let's go, bring it out.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you, it was not on Netflix, but it's actually a similar streaming chain service that I was watching last night. So I have this guilty pleasure.
Yeah. Go on.
Which is that I like, I can disconnect when I watch really, really low intelligence reality TV, and I've been trying a little bit of different reality shows, and I probably came to the bottom step on the ladder on those reality shows. So this is a show called X on the Beach.
Yeah,
I watched that episode of that last night. The reason why I like that show is because every other reality show have rules. So I obviously watch it for the drama. Yeah. That's what we all watch it for. X on the Beach's concept is that there are no rules. But if you don't make entertaining TV, we're going to cut you out in an instant. And everybody knows that that's the rules, right? So they have a tablet and they will go like, pling, you're out. Because you haven't made entertaining TV for the last 24 hours, right?
That's brutal.
That is brutal, and that makes it be extremely extreme in everything. Like, everything they do is to get attention, to make those 5 minutes of TV that will keep them in the show.
I feel like future X on the Beach participants will regret that 5 years from now. Like, it's much safer to be on a podcast here with me than going on Sex on the Beach.
That is true, and that is something I'm considering as I watch it, because these are like 20-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not sure you have any idea of the impact of the stuff you're doing right now. Like, but
you can spin it around. I think it's for resilience. Like, if you have a Sex on the Beach BDR applying for a job in a couple of years, then they overcome some stuff.
Like, I have no problem with that. If you're good at selling, that's then I won't shame you due to a doubtful choice on a reality show 5 years ago. No problem.
No, I've been hiring in big organizations, right? So then you are in an extremely small box, like even if you have the most talented 24-year-old that is, super cool and ticks all other boxes, if they haven't done enterprise sales before, you kind of can't get them into a matrix organization. They won't survive, and you don't have time to let them thrive and in the teams that I had anyway. So what I'm looking forward to hiring is, finding these like niche little crazy stories from when you were a kid. Like I remember I was the second highest lottery ticket seller as a 7-year-old in Oslo. And I won like tickets to Norway, Schweiz to watch that. And then like the other guy, Peter, like he's also like high agency salesperson today. So like if you can find someone that does stupid things, like win at a little bit stupid games when you're a kid. Another friend of mine was in Swedish national team for StarCraft. Like he is like, and if you can find someone who's niched interest in something like that, and you just like can direct that over to the sales part, that will be great.
And I actually love that, and I do that myself when I interview. I actually start in my childhood, and the reason why I do that is it is one of the other big no-nos I have in interviews process. It's like people who's like, oh, I kind of fell into it, which I don't mind because a lot of people fall into it. But if I get the feeling that this is like, oh, it's a segue, it's not, I have a really hard time coping with that, because if you don't feel like this is where you want to be, how are you going to work hard every single day to improve? So there's something in that I really like, that you kind of can link it back. And, I might have fallen into it, but already in my childhood, I were showing signs that I didn't catch up, that this would potentially be the right place for me. I think it's a cool story.
It's also like back to the if you're not convinced that you're gonna do this, like how are you gonna be able to stand with the rejection? I mean, like when you're in e-commerce businesses, like if you have a 5% conversion rate, you're like super happy. I think the average is around 2. And then like you go into sales, and if you have 5% conversion, you call 100 people, you have 100 meetings, and you get like five yeses, and you're like, that's pretty tough, but yeah. You should be happy, because like if you have 5 people converting in enterprise sales, you're going to pay everything from 10 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So it's but to have that mindset shift to go from like, I'm actually happy to get the no so I can get to the yes, that's and hopefully you have a little bit better conversions than 5% when you have a qualified lead. But from dial to conversion, that's around 5%, right? So
yeah, and I would say that depends on how you slice the cake, right? Necessarily, how qualified are you looking at it before you go into it? But I think another like trait is, you have the self-insight to analyze what you do wrong when you lose is equally important, right? Obviously, doing that on 95 cold calls out of 100, it's not necessarily the good, but I think there's a lot around constantly, and that's what I tell my team is like, and I did that a lot myself as an IC, is like, if you lose a deal, or if you have a deal that has a red flag that now potentially will make you lose it, you're like, okay, what are the things that I'm going to be doing to change that scenario, or what are the things that I'm going to be doing to make sure that we don't land here next time, right?
So how do you measure that? Like, what kind of systems do you have in place to catch if something is red flags, or if it's not going in the direction that you want?
We use a lot, but it's primarily my COO that are, or VP of operations, that are running the whole data layer beneath. So he's kind of our trusted data guy, right? He will deliver any data and any piece of data that we need. But we use a number of different tools. We use everything, obviously, from CRM. We use prospecting tools that will give us metrics around that. We use like BI tools to understand like the general performance. We have a number of different tools, and ton of dashboards in Salesforce. Is probably
if you can only choose one dashboard that you will forever use in your role as VP of Sales, which dashboard would that be?
Forecasting.
Forecasting. Okay. What is like when you're having your forecast calls? What is it that you hate the most when an AE shows up, and what is it that like what does a good forecasting call look like?
Like, so ideally, when I look at a forecasting call, the minority of that is understanding where we're gonna land on a certain time frame, and the majority of that call should be how can we help you do better, right? That's the number one thing, is that you want it to become not a checkbox exercise so you can deliver number one to your stakeholders, but more trying to identify what are the holes in this cheese and how can I support you in thinking about closing those holes in the potential deal, right? That's definitely how I see it.
Makes sense. And I'm assuming you're using the CRM to highlight any holes.
Yeah, and then we used a Medic framework, which is something that we implemented on early. Actually, we already implemented it before the market fit. I'm not sure that was relevant. We could potentially have waited a little bit. We did it very early. We implemented command of the message, Medic, and 3Ys as the kind of 3 navigation tools, as I call them. They are fundamentally, but we're not done implementing that, and I'm not sure we ever will be. That's a kind of fun part about that I see it kind of as a living, continuous iteration and improvement.
How come you said Medic? I mean, there's some variations of the Medic framework. You have paper process, Medpick. Sometimes you use 2 Cs for champion and competition. When you say Medic, are you using 1 or 2 Cs?
1 C, and we did adjust it a little bit, and we run with the slimmest version we could right now. But what we originally took out was we took out competition. This is going to sound super lame because this is what any ambitious startup will tell you, but we were very early in the market. It's not like we're building necessarily a new market, but we're taking what was used to be a very, very expensive consultancy service. We are now automating part of that and delivering it, obviously, with a lot of different benefits. We have delivering it much faster, much cheaper, and with the same quality, right? But as we were the first one moving into automating that, our competition was basically do nothing. That was our constant competition.
Inertia.
Yeah, so putting the last C in, which would be like, it would be a natural part of our process to ask, why are they doing this? What are they achieving? What metrics are we trying to solve for them? And they would be related to the same time of competition always.
Okay, makes sense. What about paper process? I feel like, most of the times when you're having enterprise sales, a lot of the person, like the champion on the next side of the table, doesn't necessarily know how to get to a document sign. Like, how come you put that out?
And we kind of do have that bit, but we have kind of extracted that out of Medic. We still have it in the CRM as a must-do thing, but it heavily relates to the kind of due diligence around the deal. As we only work with Fortune 500s, that means, or more or less exclusively work with them, it means that the whole vendor onboarding process is something we manage separately in every deal because it's always super rigid.
Yeah.
You could put it into Medic and just have it as part of that, but we just isolate it. We have a team that supports that exclusively because it is between a 4-week and a 6-month process to do that on every client, right?
Yeah, which is, like it probably needs a little bit more than just a P then to get sorted. But you've gone, through all these different roles, like in software sales. When was the first time you started using Medic or Medpick, and how have you, has it been beneficial in each roles, or when is it working for you? When doesn't it work for you?
I think first time was in Salesforce, if I remember correctly. We started kind of rolling it out, but it didn't feel like it was it was more like a individual manager thing that was rolled out on individual teams. It was not a company-wide policy. It might be today, but back when I were there. So it was up to that individual account executive to decide whether they wanted to use Medic, or it's typically the sales director, right? More likely they was pushing that on the team. But I think if the IC doesn't believe in the value of Medic, it will never be good. Like it will
I see
be
as an individual contributor.
Yes, exactly. So if the AE doesn't believe that this will actually benefit him or her in progressing and closing more deals, it's going to be a checkbox exercise and will bring no value at all. It will just bring more admin.
And that's the biggest. I mean, when you talk about medpick or medic or whatever alteration you want, one of the top objections that comes out is like, my A's don't see the value in it. They just treat it as a checkbox exercise. But when you then have organizations fully implementing it, you can see like up to 300% increase in win rates. Let's say, like there was a study by Pavilion that did that. They took over 3.5 million opportunities and looked at, how does well-performing medpick companies perform versus those who doesn't have it implemented. So it's like the data is there for it to be shown, but still their main feedback or objection is that it's a checkbox exercise. What do you think is the cause of that?
I'm not sure, but I think everybody does some kind of qualification framework, right? Whether it's medic or band or whatever. Like back in the days in Oracle, we used band, right? Which is just a super simplified version of medic. And then they put tools on top of that qualification method. So if they run by a band framework, they know that big deals needs a business case to close. You cannot do a business case without having the metrics, which is something that doesn't organically live in the band method. So I think everybody knows what it needs to, or most people knows what it needs, or sales leaders knows what it needs to close a big deal, but they're just not structuring it, which I don't understand. It's like, you can't tell me that if you have an ambition of closing, 100, 200, 500, $1 million deals, you can't tell me that that client is not going to demand some sort of indication of the value that you're going to be bringing them, right? So I think it's maybe more of a kind of process thing. I would say that companies does not believe in it, and then potentially because they just do it wrong. I assume they're doing it as a management exercise instead of an AE exercise. Like we did a lot of sessions when we rolled out medic that was not about this is medic, this is how it works, this is the letters. We did like, why are we actually in need of a GPS to steer our deals, which I essentially see it as being, right? It's the compass on how likely are you to close a deal. What directions do you need to take to actually close this deal, right? So I think the whole foundation of rolling out medic is much more fundamental understanding on the frontline level of why is it good for me to use, rather than being like a sales leader building fields in Salesforce.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's also like the reason why I love medpick is because I saw that it worked, and I guess, the A's who doesn't love it maybe didn't get the training to make it work. I came into a big organization. I have never sold enterprise sales before, and just to have a common language to talk to my colleagues about, I could ask about champions, pain, metrics, and we could, move this deal forward. Versus, like if it's just top down and like I need you to fill out this field, it kind of loses a little bit of the value.
One other thing actually that I think also is crucial for how we roll out medic, and I don't know if this is always how you do, you tell me, but I think some people might make this mistake of rolling out a full medic into like this is qualification that you do when you do the first discovery call. So you sit with this like astonishing amount of information you have to extract from a deal at any stage. What we basically did was we split out medic into our sales cycle, and we said, well, when you have the first initial meeting, your focus is pain, right? You need to understand, is there pain that we could potentially solve? And then you need to understand what are the decision process if we solve that pain. We saw those as two fundamental things to progress initially. And then we kind of roll it out throughout our different sales stages. So down to the level where we have what are the questions that you typically ask to identify this area of medic. We use a kind of a proof of value or pilot method. So often we can actually sell that pilot without having completed medic because those are smaller. They're always paid, but they're smaller, deals where the purpose is that they should be able to test us out relatively quickly. But when you take a pilot to a large deal or medium-sized to large deal, then you suddenly need to be able to justify your value through a business case where the metrics becomes highly relevant, etc. So we're trying to really split it out, make it simple, and not overburden our AEs on, why is this stage 1 deal not having all the medic pieces filled out, right?
Which would be incredibly stupid, because like if you go in and ask, like, hey Alex, I want to sell you this shit, and then I'm like, what's your paper process? They're like, get the fuck out of here. But it's also, I 100% agree. I'm interested. You say that you the process of getting in there. Do you mean then the decision process, or is it that formalized that you then put pain first, or implicating pain and then process? Is that how you've prioritized it?
Yeah, we have, but it comes back to the combination of us running, pilots and a pilot model, and then the fact that we obviously need to. So the pilot, we work with these very large global enterprises, because we need to know very early on, once they're excited about what we do and us potentially solving the pain that they have. We need to know, is this 6 months is this 6 months in the future? So we need to understand, if we go in relatively small, are you able to sign on this individually by yourself without having to go through the whole legal due diligence process or not? Because that is, if we have to go through the 6 months, we need to be pretty sharp at what is the potential value on the other side, because we're mobilizing a lot of resources towards getting that through, right?
Interesting, because like, if you would think about it traditionally, I would say that the decision process would be much later in the stage. One thing that I also noticed is that people are, one of the reasons I think where people are, when they are hating on it, is that they are thinking about it as a full sales methodology instead of just looking at it as a sales discovery methodology. Like, it should be on top of your already existing methodology. It falls flat and it's not, rich enough to stand on its own legs. I think that's a big thing to remember. Another thing is, like, when you're actually doing the training, a lot of people have troubles now even getting to the pain. Like, when I talk to a lot of sales leaders out there, they're saying, I would love to use MedPick, but I'm not even getting enough opportunities in top of funnel to get to having a conversation about that. So it's like, how can we run better discoveries to actually identify, because pain is in 3 different levels. Like, you have identify pain, you have indicating of pain, and then you finally get to implication of pain, when you as a salesperson is trying to stay out of the way and just help them out to run internally and sort shit out, right? So like, but a lot of the times, just getting to identifying the pain, is there enough pain here for us to actually run a process? Is the pain great enough? That's I see that a lot of sales organizations have challenges in that as well. Like, how are you guys running your discoveries? Have you BANT, I feel, is more towards, SDR, BDR organizations early in the state, and that's why it's so popular there, whereas MedPick is a little bit later. So that maybe why that's also is a differentiator. But how are you guys doing it when it comes to discovery and actually finding the pain?
I think pain is super hard. First of all, I think next to metrics is probably the hardest to identify, in my opinion. But I think first thing we do is we record all our calls, and then we actually view them and we give feedback to more or less
like a viewing party.
No, we do them individually and then we give feedback. Maybe more not to expose people, but we have done it where we have then showed it at our all hands, obviously, if they're comfortable, to the company to show examples how our ICP thinks and acts. But I think what in my opinion, the hardest thing about pain is that it's really easy to get to surface level pain. It's like, in my opinion, you can get that relatively easy. Oh, I'm tired because I spent half of my day doing manual repetitive labor. I don't like that. The difference between a decent AE and a great AE, in my opinion, is the ability to actually dig deeper. And I think it maybe comes into excitement that AEs get excited when they feel like there is a pain. Oh, there is something that hurts for this potential client or this prospect. The ability to actually continue to say, what does that mean? How does that impact you? Is this a priority for you? If we could solve that for you, what could you then do with your time? Those levels of underlying pain is typically, in my opinion, what you're able to build a great rapport on. It's what you're able to attach your value proposition to, and it's ultimately what will sell the solution. So I think in my opinion, surface level pain for our company anyway, relatively easy. Deeper kind of pain is where we are continuously developing.
But that's like the greater the pain, the greater the payout, right? I think maybe that's when an experienced salesperson have figured out that I can charge a lot more for this if the pain is greater, right? It's
yeah, and then I think it's also an enterprise thing where if you sell to SMBs or even small mid-market and you get somebody's time, that time is often super valuable because they are living in the same storm that we do. They are trying to take out fires. They are a much smaller, leaner organization, etc. So when you get that time, they're very serious about something. When you talk to very, very large enterprises, ultimately, occasionally they will have time to just take meetings and talk to you. And they might. And we still do that where we run into where we think we have a really strong case, but then suddenly, a new shiny objects come by and they're like, whoa, we go over here. So that's why I believe that especially around enterprise sales, to get that really, really deep understanding of where it hurts. And what are your priorities? Is this, your 7th or 8th priority, or is this a top 1 or 2 priority? Because that's the difference between closing that deal and not closing it ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Where is it on the metrics in terms of what priorities for the organization? But I find time is a sneaky little bugger because people say they prioritize time, but that's what they say. It's not what they do. Because if you look at, take ours, for example, we say that we're going to do a lot of things and we're going to prioritize that, but we don't. So it's selling time is sometimes nice to have, but it doesn't inflict enough pain to actually do the change. At least that's my...
Agree. And also, obviously, what you typically say is that, efficiency kind of increase or cost reduction is not really where you want to sell your product. You want to sell it into realizing the value of the future goals, right, or whatnot. But for our business, it's just what is mostly important for me in the beginning of a partnership is that you can really quantify what you're doing. You can give them a number relatively quickly.
Yeah.
This is what I will save you. This is what I'm going to free you up for you. This is what you can expect in terms of the value short term. And ultimately, I think that drives a lot more decision.
And smacking that number early in a sales process is pretty fun as well. Because
second meeting.
Yeah,
second meeting, we'll have that for them.
Because then it's it doesn't even matter what that number is. Because if you just we're going to save you $500 million, and they're like, that's outrageous. What are you talking about? Then it's what do you think the number will be? And they're like, 250. Lucky day, this will only cost you 10 million. It's a business case done. We talked about just great salespeople know that greater pain equals greater payouts. One of the things that I've heard throughout my career is that if you want to earn a lot of money, you stay as an AE. If you want to have a career, you go into management. You're on this path into management, selling, compensating and getting compensated. When I say this, what bubbles in your stomach? Do you agree? Does it make sense, or do you disagree on that statement?
Fully agree, and it's very real both for us and for any former job I had. Is that the rockstar A's they earn more money than management? I think that's that's completely fine. Ultimately, what I see a great AE being somebody that is really leading the charge for the whole sales organization. Ideally, I want an AE where every other AE is looking at them, or few, and saying, that's the person I want to be tomorrow, and that makes them work harder. The best AEs in our company is maybe doubling my salary.
Yeah, but okay, challenge mode. How is it then that you're not still an AE? Because you is one of the best AEs I've ever worked with, and you earned a lot of money then. How you end up being that doesn't make sense then. Why would anyone go into management?
Coming back to what we kind of started off the conversation with is that, to be honest, I felt like I could sell most products quite efficiently because I had the right mentality about it. But for me, it was all about development. It was like this was the next stage that I developed. But then again, one of the reasons why I didn't go the management way in the large companies was because I really want to be close to the customers. And in a startup, in an early stage scale up, there's only one rule: is that everybody sells. Like I have client meetings, multiple every single day. I travel as much as I used to clients. Like I would say my job is as much leader. It is being at the right stage in a deal, helping getting it over the line.
Okay.
And my biggest fear was, and obviously now I might offend some people, but I have seen examples in my past of great AEs that went into leadership, especially probably in very large companies, and they became like dashboard leaderships. Like, oh, I'm used to calling clients every day. Now I don't know what to do, so I sit in my Salesforce quota attainment dashboard and I just refresh it for 2 hours a day, trying to keep my head out of trouble, right? And that would always be my biggest fear. Is like that would not make me happy.
Have you updated your next steps, Alex?
I'm becoming better at updating my next steps. You can probably attest to my.
I still wake up in the middle of the night sweating about your app rigor or lack of. But last question on this topic before we move on. So when GetWhy goes IPO, will the AEs or the management team have a bigger payout?
The management team, I would say.
So that would be a reason why you get into management as well, because you get equity.
That's definitely the long-term financial outlook.
Okay. Because there should be some kind of when we're all agreed that in all of the world religions that is out there, there's only one that everyone has agreed upon. That's capitalism.
Yes.
So,
and that is where they cash out, right? I just saw that my previous CEO in my former company, who did 3 exits with that company, he bought an ABA team, he bought an NFL team, he bought a soccer team in the major league, and I think an esports team as well. So at that point,
that's what you do, right? When you when you take that billionaire status, then you need to collect sports teams like it's Pokemon cards,
exactly,
or else it's like, what have you been doing with your money? It's what was it I want to talk about? We were going into compensation. What is the craziest sales stunt that you've pulled off that actually worked?
Oh, I really gotta consider what Alex 5 years from now, what Alex tomorrow is gonna like or dislike me saying no. I think I've always been quite, especially when I was an AE, I've been quite creative, and I think that have paid off massively. In former companies, I was extremely focused on the acquisitions that were made, and typically when they acquire companies, like a no touch. Oh, we don't want to spoil the culture of the smaller company that we are merging in and whatnot. But I've always been super creative, even to the point where I found the person who was in charge of the region, called them early and said, what can we do together? And I think some of those kind of creative moves have been my biggest deals ever to
pattern interrupt.
Yes,
like
definitely.
Yeah. And what is it that have you put any of those kind of pattern interruptness moves into into production in your teams today?
Yes, I have, but I would say it's also it's very much a balance when you are in a company as young from the technology perspective as we are, because the more pattern interrupts you do, the harder it is to build some sort of centralized framework. And it is crucial that you try to build something that can be repeated. Like, we will not hit our milestones if we have one person rocking. A person wouldn't be able to deliver so much that we as a company are satisfied about our achievement. So there has to be some level of repeatability in what you do, and those outliers, especially if they come from top down, can easily be poison to creating those frameworks, right? So that is truly a balance. But I think everybody in my organization has the freedom to kind of explore, test out, to be creative within the boundaries of what is benefiting the company.
What is the most gangster move you've done to motivate the team?
I once had a sales spiff where I were giving out a car. That was pretty cool. It was in my earlier days, but I basically made a spiff where I think back then I had like 1,000 euros or something like that for a spiff. So I found a really, really old car. I obviously didn't tell them that. I just had a car and like, you're gonna win a car. That was pretty creative.
You can use you remember that story about like it was like a Wendy's or a McDonald's manager who said to the employees that if the employee of the month gets a Toyota, and then they show up and it's a toy Yoda, and like she was just breaking down and got a little like Star Wars figure, and it's just like, you told me I got a Toyota. No, a Toyota. That's what it's.
And that sounds a little bit potentially demotivating, and that's something you have to be really careful about. Another actually example of that also where when we put the goal of reaching $10 million AR, which was extremely ambitious. Like extremely ambitious. I basically made this script where I got the whole company in for our company kickoff. I got everybody to close their eyes, and then I had like a 3 or 4 minute story where I was like, okay, so imagine you're sitting, you have your shorts on, you have a shirt on, you're on the beach, warm sand on your toes, light breeze on your face. You're in Hawaii. It's 1 year from now. And then I backdated that story all the way through the initiatives we were doing strategically that year to reach $10 million, up to the point where I was then in the present. And I said, now is the time we go do these things. And if we do, the whole company is sitting in Hawaii 1 year from now on this date, which was inspired by another CRO that did a similar thing. I thought that was pretty cool. What was then horrible was that we didn't reach the 10 million. And that's kind of the balance is, we knew that was super ambitious. So that was more like thing of saying, if we're going to do the impossible, how can we help that on the way? What it did do was that it made us get in a position where we could then reach it afterwards, right? But it was like those initiatives, you have to be careful with those because you don't do them twice. You do that twice, you're kind of,
It's also hard with the goal setting because I mean you shouldn't hit more than 70% of the goals that you set because if you've done that, it's too easy. And also to be fair, cold Hawaii in Denmark is very nice. It's just a couple of hours from Copenhagen. A lot that would be the budget version. The 1 million ARR of the 10, and most of the time people just want to hang out together and drink some beers and have a good time, right?
Yeah, but the thing is about initiatives is that you also have to have those approved by the board, right? And, so you have to at least do those playing fields before. You often can't just do a very big expense in a company like ours without having the full board on board.
The
right?
board wanted to do Hawaii as well. They got really a bit disappointed in you. How are you suffering from that now? Are you still getting peaks?
No, I think with good intention and great creativity, I don't think there were any. There's been no heat since. So
I've been told that because now we're talking about parties, we're talking about going big, and I was told that you chose your school based on which school had the biggest party budget, and then you made yourself the foreman of that,
yes.
So you could basically create your own party the way that you wanted. It sounds almost like that, school story is very similar to why you're now in like VP of sales. So you can, decide where you want to, have you been to Hawaii before?
I have. I studied a quarter in Hawaii. So
okay, so you already knew.
Yeah. So I'm, it wasn't explicitly due to that, but yeah, it's true with the college story that I did do that. And it was a massive party.
It was Hawaii themed.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, have you done any like? So I guess that not hitting the 10 million and not going to Hawaii was not super popular. But have you, which is okay. You're not here for a popularity context. But has there been any decisions that you made that you knew was the best for the company, that like your team would like, okay, this is not the most popular thing that that has come out of Alex?
Yeah, I think you do those. That's also part of failing, in my opinion. And I can't point out one, but I think I do them often. And I probably will do that in the future as well. But I think it's actually funny, right? Because when you look back at especially our time in my current company, right, is that when you're on that chase for market fit, for scale and whatnot, you're constantly feeling like you're on the verge of, imploding. And I think it's very, very typical. You have that feeling that, you have so many wrongs that you do constantly. It's like you have super ambitious targets, and you are constantly doing things that are not necessarily productive, and then you're trying to iterate on that. One thing we do, especially when we are in a small team and we go to a very big meeting, which is quite cool. I'll give that for free to anybody. We might have the CEO there, we have a sales director, we have some A's, etc. We actually talk about what are the milestones we have achieved. Like, what is your favorite milestone, just to also get in the right sentiment. And I think back to maybe your first question, where like, what would you do different, is that I as everybody have a tendency to think about what you lost. Like, that's constantly on my mind, is the fear of what we will lose and what we have lost. But there's so many cool milestones when you're building up an organization from scratch. It's like, so many, I would say, like, it's, you have a monthly major milestone that you make, if not, bi-weekly or weekly, right? And there's something about, I would tell me to enjoy the journey more. Like, don't be sweating constantly over, the things that you might initially get wrong.
And is that the biggest takeaway you've taken also from your, management journey now, that's, like, enjoy it more, or would it be?
Yeah, I think so. And the fun thing is, I tried by design to build that very early on. Like, I was very focused on the pre-market fit is, I don't know if I would do it again. I might, but that's a crazy period, right? You find a small, slim team with high resilience, and it's like you run through woods high speed and you just get branches in your face constantly, right? And you're getting more and more beat up the further you go through, and you just have to continue running. But back then I was very, very focused on designing an organization that was celebrating the small wins. Like, we would hug and high five initially when we booked a meeting with a low tier non-decision maker in a potentially unrelevant account, just by like, okay, it's crazy, right? Because initially it's like, you have to identify, how do you book a meeting? Like, if you can't book a meeting, you can't do anything else, right? That's like stage one. We celebrated them like crazy. Then you're like, how do you conduct that meeting and get them to even be interested in speaking to you again, right? It's not even about, at that point, it was not as much about closing for us, because we were like, no clue whether we were on the right track. Then when they're interested in kind of learning more about you, it's like, okay, can we actually get somebody to express some sort of interest in even testing this out in a small scale, right? Then you kind of do that. And in between every of these steps, there is repeating it, right? You can maybe do it once, but can I repeat it? I can maybe get that interest, but can I repeat it? And then once you have identified that somebody has actually expressed interest, it's about closing that first small scale POV, repeating that, making a mid-sized deal, and suddenly, like, and those are maybe the milestones for me in building up that team that have been, when I look back on this 5 years now, it's like, that's a lot of things that you have to do right to even get the possibility of playing in the league, right? To the stage where now that the biggest celebrations we do is when we do $1 million deal, right? now it's like, oh, but we don't think about the fact that we actually close these smaller pilots consistently. 1.5 years ago, that was what we were hogging out about and being like over the moon by the fact that we actually could do that.
But it's fun, right? My first CEO called it løypebrøyter, like the first person in the ski track to clear the path behind the areas. And if you get that first person to do something, it's so much easier. And in Meltwater, the first thing that happened, who can take 200% of the monthly target? Nobody could do that. It's impossible. And then one guy did it, and then two guys did it, and 3 guys did it. And it's the same, right? But it's so hard when you're in the moment to have that reframing of mind that you're actually oh, this is actually moving the needle. It's because a lot of times you can also go around and think that you're moving the needle, but you're actually just fluffing. What's the one thing that you tell new AEs that they should focus on in order to move the needle for them on every day or every week or monthly basis?
This is probably the answer that you would get from most sales leaders. But the way I look at it is, if you cannot build pipeline, you don't get a chance to play on the field, right? And I think there is a direct correlation between the amount of pipeline and how fast you're going to develop. Because if the best AEs that I have seen, they have 4 to 8 client meetings a day. That's 4 to 8 possibilities of improving how you perform in those scenarios. If you do that over an extended period of time, you will learn how to close them. If you learn how to close them, you can understand how to improve that part of the cycle as well, right? So it's like we have 2 PG channels. We have outbound, which is something every person in the sales organization does, me included, and then we have events that we go through. So we don't have a big inbound engine of leads coming in, primarily due to the fact that we were so effectively doing it outbound that starting an engine, our cost of acquisition per lead would be so high that it wouldn't make sense for our stage now. Anyway.
Yeah, my mantra was always and still is, you have, as a salesperson, you have to generate pipe, progress pipe, and close pipe. And at any given time, you need at least do one of those 3 things, because if you have a massive deal, obviously it's going to be really hard to generate and progress. But if you don't do any of those 3 things, which I think it's easier to fall in a trap of that when you're in a really big organization than a small organization. But, there's so many other topics that you can do, learnings, trainings, webinars, conferences, whatever. But if you don't go distill down to one of those 3 things, you're gonna end up on a pip. That's just what happens.
And you build an organization that's used to getting a lot of inbounds. You also build a comfort blanket, right? Where it's like, I have dependencies externally for my own success, which ideally is not how I see an AE looking at it. It's like, I can make myself successful.
Yeah,
in any scenario, in any situation, right?
But I think all the best AEs that I've always worked with has always done their own. They had hold their own destiny in their own hands. And then if marketing partners, BDRs, SDRs, whatever, helped, all of a sudden, the CEO has a cousin that isn't in the market for something, and it happens to be in my portfolio. Great, right? But at least I'm not banking on that to happen. I don't want to put my destiny in anyone else's hands.
Exactly.
What is it, today, you're what is it that you're no, let me go back to the SDR BDR parts. Have you considered full cycle AEs versus SDR BDRs? What is it that you're thinking about on that?
I had both. I will occasionally take in a BDR. Right now we don't have BDRs. I have had them in the past. I see them more as a stepping stone. If I reach...
So right now you are doing full cycle?
Yes.
Okay, and have you split your AE teams in different patches? How does it look? How does your sales team look like?
Yes, we have done it verticalized. So we have vertical teams that operate. We have a relatively slim ICP. Remember that we work with the largest companies in the world. So when I say slim, it's not based on the amount of personas or people that they can sell to. But we look at a very, very kind of consistent enterprise segment. Like from the level to what are the margins on their products, because we know how higher margins means higher investment, higher competitiveness in the market. And then we've basically slimmed it down to 50 companies that we want to work with on top of the clients that we have now. So that's where our full focus is. Then there's a number of buyers. Remember that these accounts is typically, 20 to 1.4 million employees, so to say. So there's a number of buyers in each account, a large number. Some accounts will have 700 potential buyers in. But
so how many salespeople do you have right now, and how is that split up?
We have 6 salespeople right now. We actually had a much larger sales organization a year ago. When we also did have a BDR team back then, etc. We look at a lot of like employee productivity. Like, are we at the maximum capacity of our productivity on our employees? I don't think we are yet either in the sales team, even though we are very, very slim organization. But I actually believe we can do a lot because we have a lot of supporting functions around them. So in the sales team, we are 6 right now, besides myself. And full cycle, as I said, we did have BDRs and SDRs, but my feeling is that an AE is better building pipeline than they typically are. Not necessarily based on the volume, but based on the conversion rate. Like, you will see pipeline that are AE generated have a much higher conversion rate than BDR generated pipeline. That was my experience anyway. So I would say that BDR organizations are very good when you reach a certain size of scale, because they become more of a marketing asset than a sales asset. They are the ones that will continuously make sure that at scale, our name is in the inbox, or is on the phone, or is in the LinkedIn message box. So it becomes, in my opinion, becomes a little bit of a marketing asset rather than a sales asset. And then we take in BDRs, but only from the point of, here we have an individual that we believe can be a rock star, full cycle AE, but putting a revenue target on this individual would potentially break their neck at this stage of their career. So we take them in, we educate them while they're BDR, and we get them into being a full cycle AE as fast.
Yeah, I guess since you're also only working with the biggest companies, it's harder to, like, if you would have had a long tail of SMB clients as well, then you could have put that full cycle into that, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think there is, like, if I were to build a company where the ICP would be, small to medium sized, I first of all think that would be quite much easier, just for anybody listening that are considering one or the other. So I would have done many choices different if that was the scenario. But obviously, I also do believe that as in any other company, if you crack the code to enterprise, that is the hockey stick revenue unlock, right? So that's what we are trying, but we are trying to front load that, which is very hard because it takes a big organization to support them. There's a lot of due diligence. There's a lot of resources being thrown at these organizations, even to be able to play with them. So it's, I would say it's a high risk, high outcome strategy, which is working very well with my personality.
Wasn't that our team name back in the days? High risk, high reward.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we had that.
Team liability.
Yes.
Shout out to Daniel Axelsson.
We have our name today is Team Swing Big.
So Team Swing Big.
Yeah. So everything we do is baseball theme. So when we have enablement, we call it batting practice, etc. So
why did you pick the most boring sports in the world to have as a naming convention?
Because sales is not a 1 hour high intensity sport. It's a long game, right?
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Only the fact that the best marathoners is sprinting a marathon.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No, it's actually we have our household American in the team, and it was his idea. I think it was great to.
I mean, it's good hot dogs. I can give you that, but I'll show up in the 7th inning. When you're selling to this, like, 30 top, the top 30 clients that you want to have, like how, from an investor perspective, how are they looking at the total addressable market? Like, will it, because that's, I don't know, but like, I feel like, oh, are we worried that you have enough TAM to grow into? Or how does that work?
No, but the way we look at it is that the total addressable market is extremely large. But my mentality is that if you cannot slim that down to more or less almost fill out your time completely, then you're trying to be something for everybody and you're basically something for none. Like if there is a client group that is more appealing, either from a potential commercial outlook because or financial outlook, because you have the easiest time getting into it or selling to them, there might be many different factors in that. If you're not slimming it down to those bare, you call it total addressable market versus, serviceable market, right? If you don't cut it down to that serviceable market, then in my opinion, you're wasting a lot of resources. You're trying to take your time and slim it down. We could go for that was the problem. We could go for more or less any company in the world, like any company that has a marketing department, we could basically sell into if we wanted. So,
but you said also that if you could maybe give some advice, you would start in the SMB mid market. Well, you could. You're still like scaling and growing, right? You could pivot and do a more of a smaller sales cycle, short, more high velocity sales kind of gig, wouldn't you?
We could, but we also again back to the kind of risk profile of me, and I do believe the company to some extent as well, is that we have shown and proven that we can not only win large enterprises, we can actually grow them to extremely large deals like the plus $1 million mark, which is probably one of the reasons that the investors are so interested in us. Because if you work with, top 30 largest consumer brands in the world, and you can show that you can actually scale these extremely fast, then you also have a very appealing story. And the narrative around that is that a senior person, a semi-senior person in a very large company will be the top dog in a smaller company once they change the gear. So there's a lot of potential organic growth coming out of the mid to long term or tail of that strategy. But you're constantly self-doubting whether that's correct or not, right? That's part of the job. Is you're constantly, is this right? Could we do it better this way? Should we do it this way, right? That's part of the, not only my responsibility, but the whole leadership team of the company.
That's also like I have never experienced this amount of self-doubt, like as starting, something new and like going after it. It's like every day I kind of have to remind myself that, tell the demons to get back in the closet, because it's like, is this real? And I mean, you guys are smashing it, and it's interesting that you're still feeling a little bit like the demons are coming. But
I spoke a lot to CEOs of very, very successful companies that have exited and have earned, more money than they can count or spend for the rest of their life. Also read a lot about, and I really think that's a common theme. I even believe, 1, 2, 3 years from now, when we hopefully have tripled, quadrupled, or whatever our AR. 1 year from now, probably, if you ask my CEO, running that back. But I think we'll still have the same level of self-doubt. I think as you go into a scale where then suddenly you have the issue of opening offices up, which can potentially also be a threatening exercise to do to a company, right? You are suddenly opening up in the US, you're opening up in APAC, you don't know if you're building 5 different companies at the same time, and you can't ever consolidate. I think there'll be different levels of concerns all the way until you're not part of it anymore.
Yeah, like bigger ARR, bigger problems.
And probably if you ask Mark Benioff from Salesforce, he probably still have some concerns, I would say. He just have larger scale concerns that will,
If you look, around the people, like if you come too close to the sun, Mark Benioff, you kind of like burn out, because it's, like he has quite a high of attrition on the people closest to him. So
exactly.
He has a firm belief, and he makes shit happen. If you can't, then someone else will. Back to the full cycle AE. Like, how does an AE schedule their week then? Because I mean, it's to generate pipe, and also like then having these meetings, it's very time consuming, and you have to be quite disciplined in order to how are they doing it, and what are you measuring to make sure that they are because you get what you measure, right?
Yes, we do have two kind of levels of AEs in our organization. So we have the strategic AEs, and that's due to the accounts we work with, right? They are sometimes you have to be able to stakeholder manage as a spider web, right? You will have some of my AEs have 30, 40 different contacts within the same account. That is something, in my opinion, only a quite senior sales resource can actually effectively progress and utilize to drive a client towards either a larger deal or what else. So we have strategic A's, and then we have our kind of normal A's, so to say. They are both working towards the same accounts, but the way we have built it is that before an account reaches $200,000 in AR, they share the revenue, they share the responsibility. As soon as it go above 200K, then it becomes exclusively the strategic A that are compensated and running it. And the whole reason is that we saw that in the first kind of 6 to 12 months as you build the account up, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, more than what one person necessarily wants to do if he's a strategic resource in knocking in doors to new potential departments, identifying what the different stakeholders, how they align to each other. So we kind of have that supporting AE where the strategic AE can allocate some of their resources to some of the more like day-to-day grinding. And then you have the strategic person who has the oversight on the account and are responsible for taking that account up to $1 million.
Okay, but so how would you from a week when you're having your team meeting on a weekly team meeting? What is it that you're looking for then from activities and progression and such for these accounts?
So I'm very much focused on, when it comes to kind of prospecting, which is the first stage of that, I'm very much focused on outcomes. I do believe that there are no 100% correct strategy for generating pipeline, because I believe every AE have different strength. We had people who can, be magicians on LinkedIn. They know exactly how to have a written conversation, gain interest, and get that meeting. We have other people who might not necessarily be so strong in that, but they can call any person, and if they get a hold of them, they'll have a meeting. So I really don't like the fact of forcing, these micromanaging tasks down to people. I do believe in that if we see performance issues, especially if they start blaming externally, then that's fine to put on them as a, apparently you cannot manage your own strength. Let me help you do that. So we obviously we track that, but we track it on an outcome level. Okay. And that outcome is correlated to the amount of pipeline you have. Because if you have a juicy, large pipeline, it's fine that you are not delivering as many, potentially new meeting or client dialogues. But if you're lacking on one, your focus should be on the other, right?
Yeah, no, that's what I was about to say. Everything is fine when it's going well. It's more when it's not going well, right? What are you gonna want to do about it? And what do you, how are you running one-on-ones? And are you doing one-on-ones, or what's your strategy, and what is it your philosophy around one-on-ones?
I did for a long time, but also feel like one-to-one is that moment where it's basically their meeting. It's not my meeting. If I have something that I need to speak to them, I will call them in. It doesn't have to happen in a one-to-one. That's the one-to-one by definition is the one time a week where an individual can say, I want to just tell you what's on my heart, right? Work or non-work related. I started out by having one-to-ones every week, but what I experienced is there was a few people who came in with a list every week. These are the things on my mind. Love that, very constructive. Then there was the other half, which was I don't know, how's it going at home? And we ended up, which is nice, you have that conversation, but I didn't feel like it was giving either benefit to them or to me, to be honest. So what I did instead was I reversed it down and said, I have blocked half an hour per headcount in my calendar. So I blocked 3 hours every Thursday. you can block me every week if you want. You can block me occasionally, but you have to go actively in and block that for me. And I reduced the time spent on one-to-ones with like 75%.
I did the same, but retrospectively, I wish that I didn't, because it's easy to put it on the AE to say like, okay, it's your time, but the problem is that progress, generate, close pipe, and then one-on-ones is falling a little bit behind. And what I noticed was that the people that I needed to have one-on-ones with definitely didn't schedule a one-on-one. And then it became, I didn't have as close of, maybe different when you have close, smaller teams, but, like, it was just some of my people fell through the cracks, and then I didn't catch it early enough that they were about to fall out of line. And then I ended up on having attrition in the team. And I think, like, it's so easy to put it on the AE, because you're also having like shitloads of things to do. But I still believe that you should at least have some regular, just to catch the feeling. It's the same as I was watching the CIA training on the master class. I've renewed that now for 3 years in a row, and I only watch like an hour a year. It's a great great subscription model. But they were like saying, in order for you to like be able to catch if a subject is like lying to you or are like changing their tone or something, you have had to have enough meetings with them. And obviously, when you're like in a scale up, you are much tighter with your team. But I think that it's very easily when you grow to fall out of line, and then the people that you want to have one-on-ones is the one you don't have one-on-ones.
But my feeling is that, coming back to this kind of lean, slim organization that we are, is that it's kind of my job to identify that throughout the day-to-day and take that proactively. And I will have meetings with them, and obviously, when I say one-to-ones, that's the non-numbers meeting, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is my job to identify the people that are, on the kind of on a slippery road mentally on how they look at it.
It's also like, it's easy to say that, it's the one-on-ones that we're gonna do that, but it's also like, if you only as a leader talking to your team on the one-on-ones, then it's almost like you don't care for the rest of the time. Like, it's what about? But one of the things I feel like a lot of organizations is doing is that they spending way too much time on like cleaning the data and talking about like have you updated the next steps? Have you done this and that and that? Instead of like actually like you said in the beginning here, like, how can I help you move the needle on this specific deal? Because that's what's fun, right? When you're together in the room, like, war rooming and trying to like, okay, how can we break down this wall and get the prospect to actually, listen to what we're saying?
Yeah, and I think, but there is a lot of, also in our company, there's a lot of data cleaning. Like, it is great. Like, I really, really, if there's one hire that I will make, hopefully soon, is a RevRec person. Like, because that if there isn't a RevRec person, that responsibility is on you.
Yeah.
Because if nobody will look at anybody else if what you report back is not the truth, because the data is polluted, right? So it is something that takes a lot of time. As it will take hours almost every day to make sure that it is super sharp.
I would like, my first hire in a sales team that is growing as well would be like someone that can help with the Apollo data, like with the call lists, with the just the sequencing and just like A/B tests things, make sure that we have mobile and phone numbers on most of the things, because like, it's insane, even like as an SDR or BDR, like in the bigger sales SaaS organizations, a BDR has a OT of like 80,000 pounds, and then they spend 30-40% of that just doing like lists and admins and stuff, which is like a lot of money to just kind of, which you can have like a person who doesn't need to be good on the phone to do, like, who just data crunching and A/B testing, which will be like a lot less costly.
Yeah, and I think that's there's going to be so many differences as you scale up an organization. And I think those are one of the themes that will become more relevant as we scale. As you could hear on our strategy right now, we are very sharp on we don't have as much of that because we are very slim on who do we want to target in which organization. So we are not yet in the stage where we are putting the responsibility of identifying whether an account is a fit or not.
Yeah.
On the individual AE, right? But yeah, that time those concerns.
Very, very true. What's one of the stories that you end up telling the most about your career when you're in social settings? Future Alex warning.
Yeah, definitely. It depends on which social setting, I would say. But I think, I'm just super proud. And I will always be super proud of what we have accomplished, what we hopefully will accomplish. It's not a safe route. It still isn't. There's never a safe route when you decide to join a young organization. I will forever be proud of the fact that, especially through the pre-market fit team, that I found a small, lean team, and they stuck with me through that whole 9-12 months before we had a market fit, before we were fully aligned on who the ICP was. That's probably my proudest moment. But I think it was a big release when we got the funding, right? It was it's funny, right? Because it's not like we anyways didn't feel the big difference from a day-to-day perspective. We were not the type of company who wanted to go out and burn all of it immediately. So we kind of decided to put it in a bank account and kind of business as usual. And then we find out where we can find the biggest improvements. But that was a big release. But that's probably because it comes on the back of a due diligence process where you're basically having two jobs. You have a job running the business, and you have a job sharing what you do both now and retrospectively with a potential investor, right? And that is very time consuming. There are people that spend, full time on it. I've probably spent half my time or 1/3, but that's a lot to have on top of a very demanding job, right? So there was a big release, and there was a.
Was that your best closing? Or which is your best?
I think there are people in the company that would be very, very, very unhappy with me saying that was me closing that. But,
okay.
But obviously I contributed to it, as we all did.
Well, you created the product market fit together with the team and found the ICP, and you wouldn't have gotten that funding without that. But
true.
But so what is your emotionally biggest closing that you feel like that one is close to my heart?
I don't know if we can determine it as a closing, but I think last year it must have been in October. Actually, the two most senior people in my team who had been part of it since the pre-market fit, they came to us and it's like, I really want to go to an event. And they had shortlisted a number of industry-specific events where we know that the vast majority of attendees would be our ICP. We had never been at an event before. I was like, I think it's a great idea. We made the case. We made a short business case. We went to the CEO. And he's like, approved. Off you go. You're flying to the US. Remember, at that point, we had maybe one client in the US. I'm not sure. Very little footprint in the US. We were then like, oh, I've been at events. We can kind of hustle this. And luckily, our CEO is like, if we do this, we do it properly. We're not like half-ass. You're not building a booth yourself, you stupid moron, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably...
Which you already had started with the hammer.
We have signs, don't worry. So we got an external marketing agency to help us on it. And I think we then flew over to the US, and I think it's the most Wolfpack feeling I've had in my life. We were 3 people. We'd never, done it with this company anyways before. We're like flying to the US. We have no clients, more or less, over there. We took some very, very cool choices, which is we obviously appealing for insights professionals. You look at their events, it's like watching paint dry.
Okay.
I don't know. We might need to take that out. I don't know. I don't want to front though. But it's like the agency market research world is like, your booth is a logo slide.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, we go over there, we're going to kick in the door. We're going to do it different. We are like new age. We do AI. So, we want to be the odd one out.
Yeah.
So our back screen was, we had, first of all, we bought the biggest type of booth next to the market leader. These are, $15 billion companies on each side of us. We're in the middle. And fully purple background with, a humongous female football player in full female gear, and then just the subtitle "GetWhy" on your team, which was like, when you looked at that, we were like, nobody looked like us. We then made football jerseys where we got the attendee companies, where we printed them with the attendee company name on the back.
We had so smart.
American stress balls. There was like small American footballs. And then we had, because our technology allows us to do something that traditionally took 8 weeks in hours, we had done a kind of proof of value for each of the companies that we had a jersey for. And then we presented we bought a talk track at the first day, where, the insights industry is very like professional. It's a traditional old, I come from a research, educational background, So these companies speaking on that first day truck performance, like people who go up like, so I would like to show you some of the method that we have used to identify the coherence between, And I came in there and I knew fuck all. I'm a sales guy, right? And I'm not even. I'm a sales guy, and I was like, fuck it. So when I went through that whole, there was like a big room, we were presenting maybe 200 people. I grabbed a chair from the back, and I was taking it all the way through the room where it was like over the floor. I put the chair on the stage, and then I started with the aggregation of marginal gains story, which goes like, I had a picture of this guy on the first slide. Didn't introduce myself, didn't say nothing. I said, hands up, who knows this guy? Nobody raised their hands, right? They were like shell-shocked. Who the fuck is this young guy with an accent, right? And I said, this is Dave Brailsford. He was the former British Cycling Union performance director. And I'm going to tell you a story about Dave Brailsford. When he was appointed as performance director, he came into a cycling team that was the worst performing cycling team globally ever. They had never won anything significant. And then I had this whole monologue around how he painted the inside of the cars white to find marginal gains, and ultimately those obviously led to 7 Tour de France wins and whatnot. And I put all that into the story around how AI were going to disrupt that industry, allowing them to find their marginal gains. And it was like, when I got off stage, there was a queue of people wanting to talk to me at the side of the stage. And our booth was like on fire for 3 days. Like, where people came and said, I've heard about you, people are talking, we need to talk to you. And we did 42 qualified enterprise leads from that single one event.
And I mean, in when you have that's like 10% of your total where you serviceable market, right? If you're approximately.
Yeah, but that was still these early days where we're trying to identify it, right? So we were not fully in place. It was like, it's only a little more than a year ago, but obviously it's.
But what like, it just shows like if you like go a little bit pattern interrupt there as well, and like are willing to create some friction, then good stuff is happening. I love the jersey and it's because it's so obvious. You already know who the attendees will be. Like, obviously, you create that, and you like create a memorable moment for them. They're like,
yeah, they all liked it, right? They had something to bring home that was not a coffee cup or pen, right? And we were just like, we were running around the floors, always one. We were only 3 going, right? So 1 at the booth and 2 running around. And we'd be like, hey, Mr. Person from PepsiCo, I have a gift for you. and I'll be like bringing him back. And then
How did you know that they were from PepsiCo?
They have signs on. So
Okay,
I'll be like,
okay. So you're like,
yeah.
I always feel weird because I can't turn off my sales brain when I'm at conferences. So I just go look at like the badges all the time, and it's. I wish that I at one time would graduate to look people in the eye on conferences.
Yeah, but it's a problem, right? You should put that sign of the company in the forehead. That would be much more uncomfortable for everybody, right?
Much more uncomfortable. And also, people are like don't necessarily want to talk to extrovert salespeople, even though they go on conferences. It's a tough. I love that story. That is inspiring. Like I want to go on a conference now and tear some shit up.
Yeah, and I think that's really, and that's very much to my CEO, and one thing that he have really learned taught me is that, you know, if you do something, you do it full hearted, right? My idea was like, oh, we do it, you know, small and blah blah. It would have been shitty, right? It would have been, but because we took over, then it became extremely good, and now it's one of our biggest PG channels, right?
Yeah, never half-ass anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's good story. What's the best advice you ever been given from a career perspective?
I would maybe say as an AE, the best advice that I got from my first mentor was, if you want to ensure the likelihood of your own success, you should try to limit the amount of changes that you do, right? So if you change your product category, you should try to stay on the same territory. If you have a number of variables, try to change as few of them at a time when you change into something new. So don't go from a CRM sales role into UK to selling HR talent solutions into South Africa.
Yeah,
you're putting too much risk on yourself to having to absorb and learn too much at once. I think that was a great advice. I don't know. Sometimes a possibility is there, and you have to kind of take it. And so it's a counterproductive to what I started saying, which is, you want to develop as much and
but you stick to, like it's, it would be weird for us to go into like consumer goods selling now, like or like commodity selling, because we've been in SaaS our entire careers. So
Exactly.
so even though you might shift within the verticals, you're still in the fundamentals of SaaS, right?
True.
So
And then I think transitioning into leadership, I think as everybody, I had this imposter syndrome, right? I was like, oh, am I doing this? Do I have an idea? It's just like, nobody can do a job before they get it. Like, you never hire, maybe some CEOs are hired because they're hired from a competitor, blah, 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 but the idea is when you take up a new job, it's a new job. It's how fast can you learn? How fast can you adapt?
Is there anything that, like, because you're always been quite opinionated and loud about that, is it anything that you're now like, okay, I get why my previous VPs were doing that, that you didn't like as an AE, that you're now like, fuck.
Yes, I do, but it's also like, I was never, that you can feel that pain yourself when we were working together, but I've never been good at ad breaker, right? I would have so many decentralized nodes, both mentally but also physically, and I'll be like, why do you need them? I understand what the pain was when you were not filling stuff. And I remember you told me back then as well, because I think you as an IC was the same as me, very bad at it.
100%.
Then I became your pain, and now I have my... So that's like, it seems like the natural selection of life almost.
We just have to paint for our former sins as ICs. I was also horrendously bad. It's just like, if you want to be a top performer, let's let me cook. That's what they all say, right?
Yeah.
But we also
I remember you were putting notes into my CRM at some point because you were like, okay,
like, just deliver the numbers now. Like, I'll put your next steps then. We both start with an A. All good. I think we're wrapping up. Like, time is flying. There was one other things I wanted to ask you about, but I kind of forgot about that. So, but we've had a lot of nice stories here. We should do like a summary of what we talked about, which is a lot. Like just to have, so we put the end on the beginning. Like we just finished recording. This is what we're doing. Is there anything else that you would like to? Do you want to like do a GetWhy kind of rant or a pitch, or like GetWhy, where the new cream cheese of cream cheeses?
I will do something as an advice, because I think one of the hardest things that you have as a salesperson or as a sales leader is choosing the right next move, right? And that's something that I've spent a lot of time considering. What are the variables that you're looking for when you're trying to take the best informed decision on what your next move is going to be? And I think what it comes back to, especially if you, as me, were going for something that was kind of proven in the market to something that was yet to be proven, is, and it's going to sound cliche, but it's all about the people. It's like people tend to say it's all about the leader, but I don't believe it is. I think it's the leader of that, the CEO or whatnot, is very part. Typically he or she is the visionary. Then the whole leadership team beneath is truly who often makes that happen, right? And it was one of the main reasons that I did join GetWhy, was that the people that were sitting both on the CEO level but also on the immediate leadership team was extremely great at what they were doing. They were super inspiring. They were like pushing the boundaries constantly. And I think that is so apparent for me that that's important, because it doesn't all work. Like I had previous colleagues of mine who were joining startups that were like, there's so many holes in the product, there's so many blah, blah, blah. But there is. Like, that's how startup life is, right? It's around how good are you at fixing it? How good are you at adapting to it and whatnot? So that was super crucial. And then my other thing was around, I was very scared of joining companies where you were a small potential optimization at best to something that existed. It's like, I feel like if you are like, oh, but we can do it 5% better than the others in the market, then you're finding a game of diminishing returns. You're like, you will always end up either being out-innovated or out-competed on, something that you cannot do something about. So I think going into GetWhy, where you're looking at something that has been the same for the past 30 years, like super manual, super labor-intensive, time, material, cost a lot of money. Well, the possibility with AI now is that you can automate those processes, make it happen in, 25 minutes instead of 8 weeks. Was like, that's such a significant return. That's why we can even have the chance to play and grow and expand in these, global large enterprises, that the impact that we can make when we do it right is not an incremental impact. That's a huge impact on something they have been throwing money at for the last 30 years, right? Mm. So I think having those considerations is super important. Well, and then obviously, how risk averse are you, or how much are you looking for risk? Where if you are very risk averse, you should be joining a larger company, right?
I think it's the easiest way of getting rich is to, start in, like everybody thinks they're late into the game. But I mean, in the last year or so, Salesforce stock has doubled. I mean, so if you came in a year ago, got some RSUs, that's easy.
Definitely.
Like, or like, there's no one in NVIDIA that isn't a millionaire right now based on their
True.
yeah. Like I saw a statistic that like the minimum was like 20 million. That's basically like
you'll have the janitor have made 20 million on stocks.
Exactly. Do you still do the tequila trick?
When I can. It's obviously, the thing is that was developed when I was in SMB, and in SMB you have a lot of young enthusiastic founders. Right now, when you're working with these large global enterprises, you meet a lot more people who have families and maybe are not as rowdy. But
so what is the tequila trick?
Basically, at a client dinner, if you feel the mood is right, you will say that we typically do a tequila during the starter. The good thing about that is that if you get them doing a tequila during the starter, then you can definitely sell the tequila after the dessert. And if you get the tequila after the dessert, you'll be hogging it out 2 hours later in a bar.
Yeah, it's like
Proven method.
90% close rate.
Yes.
I mean, you closed me on that.
True that.
And you also showed up at Peak Performance Club on the dance floor saying, Anders, next year I want to be in your team.
Yes.
And like amongst all the best salespeople, it's a good time to pitch and
I would say if you
shoot your
go
shit.
for a promotion, the dance floor at Peak Performance Club is probably my recommended place.
I think it's also have a almost as high close rate as the tequila before
Yes.
before entrees.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for doing this, Alex. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having me. It's been fun as always. Super fun and entertaining to speak with you on this.
Yeah, good. Cool. We're wrapped.